coming from where I was coming from, suddenly you're looking Ian McKellen in the face and doing a scene with him. It's the whole thing is like, it's almost disassociative. It's like a break from reality.
Before we get started, I feel I really ought to tell you that when I first watched X2 in 2003, Pyro was my hands down favorite. So this interview is like 20 plus years in the making.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Right.
I have been recently bumping into some people where I've been getting that good feedback. I'm so worried so much of the time that people just thought Pyro was a jerk, you know?
No, Pyro is the best character, I think.
He's a complicated man, you know. He was a complicated kid at the time. But yeah, I think people like yourself were able to see through some of the arrogance and some of the brashness to the wounded soul beneath that he was. So thank you.
That's exactly right. We'll get to X2 Pyro, but I wanted to kick off sort of talking about more recent Pyro and Deadpool and Wolverine. So speaking of all this time, 18 years since you last played him, did you ever imagine your Pyro would come back in a Marvel movie? Was it ever discussed before Deadpool and Wolverine?
No, absolutely not. I thought that was very much the end of Pyro was X3, where he receives an icy headbutt from Iceman and gets knocked out, and that's the end of him. You know, which to personally I found to be a very unsatisfying ending for Pyro, but no, there had never been any discussion of him coming back. I think maybe for a brief moment, I thought maybe they bring him back for Days of Future Past, where I had heard that they brought back some friends of mine from the old movies, but it just didn't happen. It didn't really pan out, and I had made my peace with that, honestly, and then, yeah, there just started being little whispers and phone calls made, you know, to my agent of them. MCU is checking your availability, and we don't know what it's for, and maybe it's this, maybe it's that, who knows, and excitement bubbling up, and then finally, you know, a phone call with Sean Levy, where he said yes, indeed, what you suspect is the case, and we would like to bring Pyro back. So yeah, I was pretty pumped.
That's very exciting for all the Pyro fans out there, which I think there are many. So is this the
nice
same? Is this the same Pyro as the Pyro we saw before, or is it a different sort of fella?
It is. I mean, it's the same Pyro who's obvious's been through a lot, you know. So it's an older version of the Pyro. It's me. It's Pyro at my age. There's no special effects makeup, you know, putting us back to that time period or anything. So yeah,
it's directly a continuation of X2's Pyro, or is he from a different universe?
They don't. I won't. First of all, I can't get too into the specifics.
Okay.
Very. It's for your own protection, and nobody needs to be ruined from you. But I have seen already in interviews, people are talking about, you know, some multiverse stuff in there. So, you know, there's a bit of that, and with the Pyro character, I think you're not 100% certain. Clearly, he's an extension of the Pyro that we already know from the X2 films.
Amazing.
X2 and X3.
Yes. Is this Pyro pulling from Marvel's comics at all? I know that the movie version was a bit of its own thing, but this time around, are they pulling from any specific Pyro stories?
They are. They sort of took from you know, for the costume in particular, from the I think it's called X-Men Ultimates. I think it's the Pyro Ultimate little series where he has a very specific look, and they replicated the costume that version of Pyro has, but not the rest of him, because that version of Pyro is it's really interesting. He's a madman, and he's horribly burned overall.
Yes.
His entire body from all the fire that he's been playing with for his entire life. But yeah, so I think they drew upon that. So it's sort of an amalgam of the look from that run, from that universe, and then what they created for the X-Men movies, which you're correct, were a bit different from the comics. In the original comics, he's not only he's a full-grown adult, but he's Australian, and he is, of all things, a gothic romance novelist, which is absolutely fascinating, and I wish they had delved into that at some point.
I feel Pyro could still be a gothic romance novelist. Maybe we could see a Pyro writes gothic romance.
I think so too.
Marvel series on Disney Plus.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, that's right. You heard it here first. So do you think there's a shot Pyro could be back for more in the MCU, or is it feeling like this is another sort of definitive?
I think anything's possible. As we discussed, I thought Pyro was long gone. So there's always a chance. I have no idea what they have planned for the future. They play their hand pretty close to the vest. They don't let on. They don't tell you a lot. So I have no idea, but yeah, certainly anything's possible.
And if you were ever to come back and play a different hero in the universe, is there anyone you might want to try on for size, or is it all Pyro all the way?
That's a good question. I hadn't considered it. I'm obviously very, very invested in Pyro. I've been doing it for a long time. Yeah, I don't know. There's other characters I'd be interested in playing. I think I'd be horribly miscast. I'm a pretty big fan of the Punisher, and I don't think I quite fit that role. But yeah.
You never
I don't know. I'd have to think about
it.
Do you have any characters that you would see me as?
You know what? I would want the Pyro series personally to come back to life. Yeah.
I found my niche.
That's right.
Pyro.
Amazing. So let's look back a little at X2's Pyro. One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is when we see Pyro sort of looking back at his reflection in Bobby's family picture. Yeah. It really creates this vision of very stark loneliness, and it's juxtaposed with Rogue and Bobby kind of canoodling upstairs. Yeah. I think it really defined the character. Did that moment feel like it carried a lot of weight from your perspective?
Yeah, I absolutely love that you're familiar with that moment and that you brought it up, because it's a small moment in the film, but to me it was enormous, because it's, that to me, that little moments like that, Pyro staring at a picture on the mantle of somebody else's happy family, and he's clutching his lighter close to him like a security blanket almost, and it's just that one little moment lets you know that, again, this character who sort of comes off like a jerk, in the early scenes. He's very arrogant, he's very brash, and you see where that's coming from, and it's coming from a place of pain, and obviously what's suggested in that moment is that this is a kid who didn't have a family like that. He didn't have an experience like that. He's an outsider among outsiders. He goes to Professor X's school for gifted mutants, and I think a lot of the other students there, they finally found their place where they fit. But Pyro is just yet another place that he didn't quite fit in, and I think there's a real loneliness there. I think there's pain there. And that's what the Magneto character capitalizes on in the other really great, small but great moment where they're sitting next to each other, and Magneto, holds out the lighter to Pyro and makes that connection with him, and you can see that there's already a bond forming, and that maybe Magneto is sort of going to become a father figure, that Pyro really desperately needs. So yeah, X2 was my favorite, because it did have all those little moments that really, even within this gigantic, huge action film, there did exist this little very, very, you know, poignant little character arc for Pyro that was just done very, very elegantly. The two writers were Mike Doherty and Dan Harris, and they just did a really, really beautiful job with small, tiny moments hinting at just an ocean, you know, of depth.
I think so too. Did you ever, with them or by yourself, construct a specific backstory for Pyro that we didn't get to see on screen, or was it just kind of?
No, I didn't. I didn't try to interject or impose myself into whatever they had planned or whatever they were writing, because I read what they were writing, and it was good, and I dug it, and I didn't want to mess around with it or change it in any way. So I read what they wrote. I didn't ask them what they had in mind for the subtext or what was behind it, and just sort of came up with my own backstory that fit with these little elegant vignettes where they were hinting at what was going on with Pyro, and just built that story in my own head, and let that, you know, give some depth to the performance.
Well, I think it worked very well.
Thank you. You really got it. I love it.
I got it.
Yeah.
And were you pulling it all from the comics at that point when you were creating that Pyro, or was it really just the sort of movie?
I really wasn't, because, you know, at that stage, you know, all the source material they gave me, it was real old school stuff, and it didn't the stuff that I read anyway, the stuff that I was aware of that was on my radar, it didn't have a lot of that backstory. Again, it did have that interesting, like, weird, like he's a romance novelist stuff, which was just like, I was like, wow, that's not what I expected. There definitely was a break, and I think that was, again, because they wanted to tell this story that took place, you know, in this school, and the you know, the small grouping of Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro. They really wanted to tell it from a younger perspective, and that younger version of Pyro didn't exist in the comics, so a lot of it had to sort of be made up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So as a queer person, time and age have made Pyro's journey in those early X-Men movies feel especially resonant, because he kind of refuses to deny who he is, and like won't countenance anybody who hates him for his otherness. Yeah. And he doesn't want to just fit in. He wants to be like glorious. Yeah. And he really accepts himself. That's really a beautiful and powerful narrative. Is that something that occurred to you while you were creating Pyro, or that you've thought about since?
Well, first of all, I love the interpretation. It's absolutely fantastic. And all of those themes were, to me, crystal clear, you know, within that movie. There's the very, very famous moment where Iceman's parents ask him if he's ever considered not being a mutant, you know, and that the parallel there is very, very obvious.
Have you tried not being a mutant?
What was it like filming with Ian McKellen? And how did you imagine Magneto and Pyro's relationship? I really loved when he said, "You're a god among insects."
You're a god among insects.
That's great.
Yeah. it's a hard to resist, isn't it?
Very.
Yeah, working with him was, I mean, you know, the whole experience was, it was very surreal to me. You know, I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. It's pretty much as far from Hollywood as you can get, you know, and I had this dream of being an actor and being a professional actor, and I moved to New York City and believed that I would probably be doing small off Broadway theater, you know, forever, and to end up finding myself in this world and finding myself working opposite, you know, somebody like Ian McKellen, you know, who I remember I had an old VHS cassette of, you know, he had done a version of Richard III, which was like, it was like set in World War II, and it was just such a like magnum opus. He gave such a commanding performance. You know, he's just such an actor's actor, and so iconic, you know. So finding yourself in a scene coming from where I was coming from, suddenly you're looking Ian McKellen in the face and doing a scene with him. It's the whole thing is like, it's almost disassociative. It's like a break from reality. So it was it was just tremendous. The whole thing was incredible. And, you know, as I said, I think, you know, just in terms of the character relationship, I think Pyro, he looks at Magneto and he sees a lot of himself in this man, you know, who's absolutely refused to bow down, you know, and refused to accept the abuse that was heaped on him. So I think Pyro had a lot of abuse in his life, and I think Magneto had a lot of abuse in his life. And the direction they went in it was, you know, the direction of the extremist, you know, who just decides, like, I have been hurt. I want to hurt the people who hurt me, you know, and it's very simple and very seductive way of looking at things. And I think Pyro very much was, he gets seduced, you know, by Magneto and brought into that fold.
We touched a little bit about that final fight with Pyro and Bobby, and it kind of felt maybe a bit, I know I had really been looking forward to it in the lead up to X3, and then it felt kind of very concise, sort of aborted. Was there ever any more planned between them? And do you think maybe we'll see like a Pyro Iceman rematch in Deadpool and Wolverine or something?
That certainly that would certainly be a lot of fun. I'm good friends with Sean Ashmore, so I would love nothing more to get back into it, you know, than to get back into it with him. But yes, look, I agree with you. I was like, nope, it's not enough. You know, as to whether or not there had been more planned at some point, I honestly have no idea. But yeah, well, I'll be totally honest. It wasn't the way I was hoping to go out. So, and now I didn't. Now you did it. We have this extension. We have, you know. So everything worked out.
Well, hopefully in the Pyro Gothic Romance miniseries, they can have yet another rematch and Pyro can come out on top this time around. Thank you so much. This is an amazing conversation. I feel worth waiting 20 plus years to have. Yes. I'm glad we are simpatico on Pyro.
Me too. I'm so glad you're a Pyro scholar who I would never have expected that. So yeah.
#1 Pyro fan.
Thank you for caring. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My total pleasure. And I can't wait to see what Deadpool and Wolverine holds and what happens next for Pyro.
Thanks very much. I hope you enjoy it.